On today's episode of the CHGO Cubs podcast, the Cubs and Kyle Tucker do not agree to terms before arbitration, and Cubs Twitter is spiraling. We'll talk about that and more on this edition of the CHGO Cubs podcast. This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Friday. It is January 10th, Brendan, and today is one of those episodes where, we have a certain set of things we kind of want to talk about, and let's go into this player. Let's talk about, some of the decisions they've made. They DFA'd Miles Mastrobuoni today. But then ultimately something comes across the docket and we kind of have to just scrap those plans. And that subject matter for today, Thursday evening, I think around 6 Central Time, was the deadline to come to terms with players, or you would be heading for an arbitration trial. Arbitration eligible players, obviously. One of those for the Cubs, Kyle Tucker. And they did not come to an agreement. So it was reported late Thursday evening that the Cubs filed at 15, Kyle Tucker's camp at 17.5 million. And, as you might imagine, Brendan, Cubs Twitter and the fandom at large is taking this very well, very rationally, and, thinking through things really logically.
I understand those fans' point of view who are not happy about this. So MLB trade rumors projected Tucker $15.8 million. The Cubs filed at 15. It does not mean the Cubs actually offered him 15. Now this goes to hearing and you lower the floor of your negotiation. It's possible the Cubs offered 15.8, exactly what the projections had him at, and Tucker's camp wanted him at 17. And they filed for 17.5. So there's two perspectives here. The first is, well, just give him the 17.5 million, do him a favor, and keep yourself in good company with his agency and the new player himself so that you can extend him. The second is, the perspective is, well, it's only $2.5 million. What's the big deal? Why are we even doing this? This is such a bad look. If they're going to extend him anyway, then who cares about the $2.5 million? That's just an ideological point of view. The reality is the Cubs are going to try to save every single penny possible. They went over their first tax last year by $2.9 million. And Tucker's decision, before I throw it back to you, he's not, in my mind, because I put myself in his shoes, if I were a superstar player,
which you're not.
It's because of my knee. I dislocated my knee.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Sure.
If I were a player, $1 million is not going to make or break. Sure. But I'm expecting it's going to be between that 1 million window. That's not going to make or break my desire to come back. What's going to make or break my desire? $500 million. That's what's going to make or break, and living conditions. I don't think it's as big of a deal as it's being made out to be. But I understand a lot of the angst and disappointment.
I do too. I think that I totally understand it, because for a lot of people, it's going to look like you just traded for this guy. You only have him for a year. You gave up a hefty package to get him. And the first thing you're doing with him is taking him to an arbitration hearing, which Jed is not Theo. Theo is not Jed. But in recent years, that has not been something this organization was in the habit of doing. They were a big, let's settle beforehand team. Now, as you said, I think you said, they can still come to an agreement. There's the deadline tonight, and then it heads to the trial. You have to file at what you filed at. Like I said, Cubs at 15, Kyle Tucker's camp at 17.5. But you can come to a different agreement ahead of the trial and avoid it even still. So there is still runway there, and sometimes you just run out, whatever. But I think, I don't know, this is one of those where like I try to be, I don't want to say like agnostic, but like try to keep a level perspective.
Do you believe it's a big deal? Just forget the fans' perspective, you personally.
I don't think it's a big deal as it relates
Okay.
to them extending him. I think it either reflects that they don't have an interest in extending him and they need him into, hold on, don't do that. Like, let me get
Okay,
through it.
sure,
Okay. I'm not,
sure.
yeah. I think it either reflects that they don't intend to extend him, which I don't believe is the case. There, I'll add that.
There you go.
And they don't care. They want his 2025 number at what they need it at for that team to make that team good, and they'll cross the free agency bridge when they do. Or kind of like you said, like, this is a business. This is how this process works. It's not as though Jed Hoyer and Kyle Tucker are sitting at a conference room table exchanging these figures themselves, right? Kyle Tucker, for all we know, might have no idea this is even happening. Like,
Right.
on the Cubs, I'm showing up. You tell me, and we'll deal with it. So there's different ways to read this. I will say, though, like, I do totally understand the impulse reaction that a lot of people have where it's like, this is just a bad look for them. And I think it is. Whether it has ramifications, like you said, if the Cubs decide to go through this process, but then later offer him $500 million, like, this isn't going to matter. If they have the best offer when he's a free agent, he's going to stay here. He's not going to hold that against them. I don't know why there. And it happened with Chris Bryant too. Like, no matter how many times his camp or his dad, and we talked with Evan Altman from Cubs Insider a lot, with his dad, Mike Bryant, no matter how many times they said they did not care about the like contract thing in the beginning, like not calling him up right away. They did not care about that. He was crying in the dugout when he got traded by the Cubs. Like, he wasn't sitting there thinking, oh, thank God I'm out of here because they held me down for an extra week, for my defense so that Michael. So it's like, I don't think the players like think like that. Like, Aaron Judge went to arbitration with the Yankees. I think, and when we were talking about near $20 million that his arbitration contract was valued at, and he signed the extension there. He stayed there. Like, he put on the whole charade with the Giants, and he's a Yankee. He's going to be a Yankee for life. So there's precedent for these things. Like I said, though, I do think it is a bad look. Whether this is how the business works, whether this is how these things are done, like I've worked on these before. This was 12 years ago in the Yankees front office as an intern, but like I've literally worked on arbitration hearings.
Well, Brian Cashman learned a thing or two from you.
From me, yeah.
From you.
Listen, I always said, unfortunately, because he was a Cub later, I personally probably cost David Robertson some money, which was just my job. But sorry, David, but it's a business. This is how these things work. But I will say, like, I do understand why some folks are like, you know what? Like, sure, maybe they need the money for the 2025 budget and they can't just cater to the player and give whatever they want because they're operating on a budget and whatever, but they shouldn't be. And like, so that's why I think the reaction is so visceral from the Cubs perspective. I don't think that other teams would have such a reaction. I think that the Cubs in particular, people are going to say, you guys are the ones using the first threshold of the luxury tax as a barrier. You are imposing that on yourself, like the value of the organization and the way you've talked about wanting to operate the organization should not have that threshold as a cap. And when you're bringing a guy over, maybe just as a show of good faith before you offer him $500 million, they should do that. I'm not saying that that's the right answer or the truth, but I definitely, I think you can understand two things at once, right?
Sure.
And you can understand that this is how the business works. If the Cubs give him the best offer in a year, this isn't going to matter. And et cetera, et cetera. I think it's also reasonable for folks to be like, come on, Cubs. You know what I mean? Just give him the $2 million. Though I will say also that is a big, relative to arbitration cases, that is a big.
It's a big
gap.
spread.
It's not a small gap. Yeah. Even though it seems that way, you know, in the scheme of things.
Wilson Contreras did not go to hearing. He was not in the Cubs. Did not extend with the Cubs. Ian Happ won his case in hearing. He extended with the Chicago Cubs. Ian Happ talked about that process on his podcast, The Compound, how they can rip him to shreds as part of the business. So in reality, the player is going to make the best decision for his own personal reasons, his own personal, quote unquote, selfish reasons, as he should, as every player should. So the look of the Cubs not agreeing with Tucker, from our perspective as fans, of course, that may not look good, but that's very different than reality. The likelihood this has a negative effect on Tucker is so extremely low. The majority, the overwhelming majority of contracts players sign are to the highest bidder. And if they're not towards the highest bidder, it's due to some type of opt-out clause. Jason Hayward is an example. He had a little bit of an opt-out towards the back end of his contract, so he took a little bit of a cheaper deal from the Cubs and St. Louis Cardinals. Also, by the way, Chicago, a more attractive city for many people versus St. Louis. There are more cases than not of teams just getting the player due to simply spending more money. That's what it's always going to be. So when we talk about Tucker in October of 2025, which hopefully we will because the Cubs are in contention and hoping we're going to extend them, this is going to be an afterthought. I guarantee you we're not going to talk about the arbitration hearing as being a huge, huge negative in their negotiation process unless something crazy happens. I'd be shocked if that's the case. It's $1 million. And to your point about the spread, unfortunately, the reality is that does matter. It does matter. They went over that first year last year by $2.9 million.
Right.
It has an effect. And right now the Cubs are not doing the best financially from all reports with their TV deal. So this is them being wise. Now, does the PR look bad? Of course. But most fans are not into the minutia that you and I are in. And those screaming on Twitter, you represent a fraction of the fan base that are psychotic. And most fans will not even see this and be like, oh, what's going on? They'll shrug it off or forget about it in 2 weeks.
I hear you. I do think though, like I understand, like you're lying to me if when that notification came across, you're not like, come on, guys. Like that, there's no way your first reaction is like, oh, okay, whatever.
No, I expected that. Like I fully expected that, Corey. I didn't realize it was going to be a $2.5 million, but the Cubs operate like this every single time.
Yeah.
They're going to try to get every single penny.
Okay. So that's going back to what I said, though. I think there's like two camps. I'm condensed in the things you can't see. There's two camps, right? Like on the one side is understanding the business and trying to like be pragmatic about things. It's the same way we talk about the payroll every episode, where it's like we could come on here and yell that they don't have a $300 million payroll, but we don't because they use the first threshold as their barrier. That's what they've been doing for years now. They're going to keep doing it. They tell us that they're going to keep doing it. So it doesn't make sense to spend the time building a $500 million roster because they're not going to do that. And so we can complain about it. We can agree that that's not the way they should be operating and that they should be better than that. But they're not going to. So let's just proceed with what they're actually going to do.
Yeah.
And I think you can apply that here. And it's like, look, this is how this front office works. This is how arbitration works, like whatever. But I think like I wouldn't also dismiss, even if it's just a fan's perspective, like this isn't it's not a good look. And when you just traded for the guy, like so if you're wanting again, and I understand, I know you're right. You know, where it's like if everybody else is at 490 and the Cubs are at 500 million when he's getting offers as a free agent, he's probably going to take the 500 unless he's dying to go home or some other, you know, extraneous factor. But like when you just traded for the guy, he hasn't even stepped in the ballpark yet as a Cub, like roll out the carpet for him, like get him in, treat him good, and set up the extension. You know what I mean? And again, I very loosely, I have worked on these things, right? I understand that sometimes these things are, again, it's not Kyle Tucker and Jed Hoyer sitting with each other, having a sandwich and talking about, his contract and all that other stuff. It literally an agent for the Cubs. I'm sure obviously they're involved, but we heard about this with the luxury tax, and budget thing where it was like, a couple people running a spreadsheet, they said in one of those reports. Like sometimes that's who's doing this stuff. When I was doing it for David Robertson, I was an intern. Like, of course, Brian Cashman and Billy Epler at the time are the ones submitting things and they have to look through everything. But it wasn't them sitting there combing through, his platform year comps to come to these numbers. Yeah. Like they're getting a portfolio and they're going, yeah, sounds good. Like my finance guys did this. Yeah. So
he's on the team regardless.
He's on the team. This is how it goes. But I'm not going to lie to you. Like the inner fan in me read that and was like, I would be a little embarrassed by this if I was Jed. Like, and the organization, you traded for the guy and the first action.
I understand.
Before CubsCon even, the first official thing going on with the organization, hey, let's go to an arbitration hearing. Like, it's just not what you want, Brendan. That's what I think. I don't have the desire to like scream about it or anything like that. And I agree with you. Like, if they want to keep him, they know what they need to do that. And that's give him the biggest contract. But it's lame. Like, this is just like, okay, guys, you know what I mean? Like, all right. And this is all the while they still haven't done anything else to fill out the roster since the last time we talked. Well, so that's why it's like a little, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
people are gonna get. You can only give people so many like quad A reliever signings and DFA news before getting this type of notification. It's just going to send them off.
You should go make yourself a tea over here. You're getting yourself worked up.
It's just lame.
I know it's lame. I hear you. It's lame. I'll do the ad break. One last thought though.
Well, we're not done with this.
I know we're not. Yeah. Let me do the ad break and I'll finish up my thought when I come back around. First ad break here from our friends CHSN. CHSN, we are sponsored by Chicago Sports Network, the new home of the Blackhawks, Bulls, and White Sox games. CHSN will broadcast more than 300 live games per year across the Blackhawks, Bulls, and White Sox, and they will feature a full lineup of original Chicago-focused sports content. They are also Chicago-based, Chicago-built, and Chicago to the core, and they're bringing it to every corner of Chicago across our 77 neighborhoods and beyond. As CHSN, Chicago comes first. Visit chsn.com and for more info on how to watch Bulls, Hawks, and Sox games all season long. Game time. You want to get tickets to Bulls games, Blackhawks games. You want to start looking at spring training. Game Time is your place to find those tickets. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets easier than ever. It filters out the fluff. It shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching for thousands of tickets to find the best value. You also see your seat directly from the app. You know exactly where you're going to see. You're not going to be surprised if you're sitting behind this brick wall or something like that. You have no surprises whatsoever when you shop on Game Time. And right now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the one last thought I wanted to finish off before I send it back to you. I would be perturbed if I truly thought that not agreeing with Tucker would hurt their chances for extending him. If that was really, truly a problem, then I would not be happy. But I just don't think it is a problem. So like I understand fans are going to fan how they want to fan. And to your point too, I understand it's a bad look, kind of. But I ask myself the question, what are the chances that what we're talking about right now actually has an effect? And my answer to that rationally is probably close to 0%. So I'm not going to get worked up over it. I'm going to be watching Kyle Tucker get a standing ovation by Cubs fans at Wrigley Field in his very first at bat. I'm not going to be thinking about arbitration then. I'm going to be hoping that Kyle Tucker will be hitting home runs in late September for the Cubs on a playoff push. I'm not going to be thinking about arbitration then. I think Kyle Tucker, when he gives a standing ovation outside the dugout, when he's hitting 3 home runs in one game, he's not going to be thinking about that then. When he goes back home to downtown Chicago in his nice penthouse, looking over the river, oh, I wish I had my $1 million. No, it's going to be an afterthought, I imagine. And that's why I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to agree with you. Do you think it is indicative at all that they might look at it as a 2025 only thing?
No.
Well, I'm just asking all the relevant questions. I
believe they will approach an extension on their own terms, as they always do. They'll view it in an opportunistic fashion. The likely scenario is he enters free agency, as most guys do at his position, at his age, at his superstardom. And the likely outcome is some team will offer more money than the Cubs. That's the reality of the situation we're playing with. Now,
no, go ahead.
Now, what I was going to say is it also depends on how the Cubs bring in more revenue this year. And the circumstances around the revenue streams, the minority equity ownership shares, all of that stuff, to which we don't know the fine details. So this could be always a one and done thing for all we know. And this was just always the game they were going to play. That's also a potential reality as well.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, like this is the type of thing that this could be a lot simpler than people are kind of imagining it to be. Like it can be the type of thing where the Cubs are like, here, we're at this number. Tucker's camp, here, we're at this number. And they go, you know what? We kind of need the money. We're trying to like figure out the rest of the team. Let's just go to the hearing. We'll let them decide. Everybody's happy. And we're going to give you $400 million.
Do they do that? They talk about their reasoning why? Like, oh, we want the money to spend more money elsewhere. I don't think they do that. They just keep it on the player, right?
Well, I mean, I'm saying like Jed can say whatever he wants to their agent while they're going through this.
That's fair. Yeah.
That wouldn't have any bearing on the hearing itself, but they can, like Jed can reach out to Kyle Tucker and be like, listen, like we're going to file, you file. If we're off, we'll let somebody else deal with it. At that point, though, I don't know why you wouldn't just deal with it, but I don't know.
But also,
I guess all I'm saying is that I think a lot of people are in their head now imagining this like extremely contentious battle, like we're at 15, like, well, we're at 19. You guys are lowballing us. You cheap. We hate it here now. And it's like, that's probably not what's happening.
Yeah.
Like it's Kyle Tucker's agent saying, nah, we're going to stick here because we want to set the precedent for this. But like,
And from Jed's perspective, there's a possibility he'll be interviewing for jobs at the end of the season if things go south. And regardless, even if he's not, he'll have to be negotiating an extension. So if he's able to get Tucker below that 17.5, he's doing his job. You add that to your check boxes of successes, and you go to your team or a future different team. And this is one reason why you're a good executive. So he's doing his job.
He's doing his job.
Unfortunately, he's doing his job.
It just, I don't know. It's hard not to feel like it would just be nice if they did whatever they needed to do to not be doing this. Like,
I get it, but I'm just not going to get myself worked up over it.
I don't think I wouldn't be either, because look, one way or another, he's here in 2025. And I think, for a lot of fans, this season was always kind of going to be clouded a bit. Like, I think there was a lot of people that they were maybe never going to have the ability to enjoy having him because they're already afraid of losing him. which
They
like
don't want to commit to protect themselves.
yeah, look, I mean, I get that and whatever, but 20 as we said when they traded for him, absent an extension, 2025 matters. This is a franchise that has not had enough success in the recent years. 2025 matters. And unfortunately, reiterating, unfortunately, right? And disappointingly, they have a lower threshold for their budget than we all believe they should have. But they do, and this is part of that. Like they need the money. As pathetic, I guess that's where it comes from, Brendan, is like even when you start to like go through this and try to be like rational and pragmatic, it sounds pathetic. Like they need the $2 million to sign some like dog shit reliever. You know what I mean? Like, pardon my French. But
He's
you know
actually interesting. You talking down about Matt Festa over there?
Yes,
future
exactly.
closer,
specifically him.
Future closer Matt Festa.
Yeah.
No offense to Matt Festa.
And so while we're on here, so it's going to be just Kyle Tucker. The Cubs avoid arbitration with Eli Morgan, so I believe they got everything.
What's his deal?
Done. $950 per Jordan.
All right, cool. So they got underneath the projection for Eli Morgan.
So I think they were under the projection on everybody except for Justin Steele. Is that correct?
I believe so.
I thought that was the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is what it is. Don't get worked up. If you're listening to this on a beautiful Friday day, go enjoy your day. You'll get Kyle Tucker at opening day. He's going to like it here.
And look, yeah, I do think ultimately that's the position I'm trying to land on. I can think this is kind of lame, even again, as someone who understands that this is just the process. Like everybody involved is just doing what the business is set up to do. This is just how this works, right? The Blue Jays took Vlad to arbitration, and there's a lot of reports that they're going to offer him this huge contract to try to keep him before he goes to free agency. I mentioned the Aaron Judge thing. Like this stuff happens, you know?
Captain Aaron Judge.
Yes. And like, look, at the end of the day, Kyle Tucker will be a Cub in 2025. Yes, nothing about this process can change that. Maybe he'll get paid 16, somewhere in the middle. Maybe the Cubs win. It's 15. Maybe Kyle Tucker wins. It's 17 and a half. But he will be a Cub in 2025. And like you, Brendan, like I don't have any reason to believe that if the Cubs are the best offer at the end of the year when he's a free agent, and in theory, they could try to knock something out earlier, right? They can use this time to also come to an extension. That's not impossible. But like, if they have the best offer in a year from now, this is not going to be the reason that he says, you know what, I'm going to take $10 million less and I'm going to go to the Yankees. Forget it. Like, if you're over the Yankees, he's going to stay here. He's going to love Wrigley Field. Hopefully the Cubs have some success. He gets to play with Dansby Swanson, build a little thing here. And if the Cubs have the right offer, they're going to get him. And, that goes back to even when they traded for him. They're either intent on doing whatever it takes to keep him, or they're not. Agreeing with him pre-arb is not really part of that. If you're going to back up the Brinks truck, this is chump change as part of that. But again, all I'm saying, Brendan, is I just don't want to dismiss folks who are kind of tired of this angle of a story for this organization.
I understand.
That's all I want to say. I think it's a valid thought. Like,
it's a valid thought. Feeling. I do think it deserves some pushback, though. That's what I'll say. That's all I was saying, because I think the pushback would be, well, what are the odds this hurts the Cubs' chances from extending Kyle Tucker? And the odds are probably slim. So the pushback is, go relax, okay? Go get some good lunch. Go get a good dinner. It's going to be okay. This is likely not going to have an effect. And if it does, maybe it's one of those rare situations, then yeah, you have every right to be upset going forward.
Well, and I mean, at that point, like, you'd have to hope that Jed, like, knows that. Like, you have some sense when you're talking to the agent or the player, like.
What, about an extension?
No, like you're saying, like, if this does in fact sour the relate, like then Jed has no idea what he's doing, and he'll be gone by the end of the year.
Look at all the former Cubs who have moved on. Darvish speaks glowingly about the Cubs. Seiya was one reason he chose the Cubs, because of you, Darvish. Schwarber did the same thing. Even Rizzo still talks fondly about the Cubs, with all the whole controversy with Hoyer kind of blowing off steam to the media when he traded him.
Yeah.
Most guys talk very favorably about their experiences. Jason Hamill, the family experience, Kyle Hendricks, who just went to the Angels. Very rarely do you see the Cubs get talked poorly on by players who leave. So I imagine a lot of that thinking process.
As I referenced earlier, none of those players got taken to arbitration.
Well, Ian Happ extended, taken to arbitration, right? Talks glowingly about the team. So it's part of the business. And this is millions of dollars. Like I wrap my head around like, oh my God, $500 million. I can't even put myself in that situation. That's so much money at stake that at that point, the whole like, oh, throw me a bone, do some goodwill. I don't care about that. I want my $500 million. I want my mansion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Again, I hear you. I just sort of I do understand. I do understand the feeling of like, come on, man, you traded for the superstar. You finally have him. It would be nice to be an organization that the sense was Jed went into this and like, yeah, sure, like this is how arbitration works. You exchange the figures, like he's just doing his job. It would be nice to have the sense of like, you know what, Jed went in there and was like, this is our guy. This is going to be our guy. We're going to take care of our guy, you know? Arbitration.
He's making $18 million, you know? Okay. Get over it.
Well, nobody's crying for Kyle
Come
Tucker.
on, give me a break here. Oh, cry me a river over $500,000. I'm being brutally honest.
I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I'm a little surprised. Again, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I am a little surprised you feel like more whatever about it than I think.
Dude, it's literally $500 million, man. It's $500 million will decide where he goes.
Contract.
Yeah. This is nothing. This is $1 million. Come on. Like I get it. That's my
pushback to that. Why not just give it to him then?
Because the context can change. What if Tucker blows out his knee in September?
Brendan.
I'm just saying.
What a horrible thing to say.
But I mean,
are you knocking on wood? Are you throwing salt?
I got wood all over
happening
right now. I'm knocking on wood over here. But I'm just saying the context changes. So like they may not even want to extend them at that rate right now, and they'll visit it back in September. But if it comes to a point where he's going to need that contract offer from the Cubs, then that's way more throwing a bone than $1 million right now in brisk January. Like that's kind of my plan. That's where I'm not upset about this. I'm trying to help fans out. You know, most of the time I'll let you guys fan how you want to fan, but this one, come on, just like, you know, wake up a little bit. I think it's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. Don't worry.
It's you know, it is reflective a little bit, and then we'll get to our second ad break here. Like it's a very strange process. Baseball is a weird sport as it relates to contract status and how the organizations have rights over the players for, you know, the first several years of their MLB service time and stuff like that. And yeah, I do agree with you. It's not as black and white as it seems, or it's more black and white than it seems. I'm not really sure. Like it's a business. It likely is not a big dramatic exchanging or conversation of numbers. It's like, hey, honestly, here's where we're at. Here's where we're at. Like
if I were a player, I would hate every front office executive. I would try to get every single penny I could get.
Yeah.
So,
well, and look, like, you know, to the other effect. I mean, obviously there's a lot of cases where guys are in ARB and, you know, stuff like that. But every team does this stuff.
Yeah.
And that was always what was so stupid about the Chris Bryant thing is like the Cubs got labeled as like the people that did that, like as if no other team was suppressing service time. It was crazy. And that they don't do that now, you know. The Dodgers every 2 minutes are putting someone on the injured list to like play with their service time and all this other stuff. It's crazy. Like there's no like player friendly organization. People think it's the Dodgers because they give out these huge contracts, but they're screwing around with everybody too. They also treat half of their pitching staff as completely expendable, like to winning one championship, their arm and shoulder, you know, notwithstanding for the rest of their lives. So it's like, it's the business. It's the business. It's no fun. And as a fan, it's very easy to look at this stuff and be like, this stinks. Like, why is this the news we're getting? Like, we're heading into Cubs Con, everybody's feeling good, feeling the vibes, and like now this is the news. I get it. You know what I mean? I'm not like, I feel like I feel like I'm allowed to be like disappointed, like this is kind of lame, you guys. And also like, all right, well, either you're going to give him the big contract offer or you're not. Like, this doesn't really have anything to do with it.
That's where I fall. And that's
show up in free agency or not. That's what I really care about. But again, I get it. It's not, we were waiting like for the news, we're waiting for the tweet, and like seeing, not agreeing to terms. Like, okay, great.
Whatever. Just go give me a closer. Okay. Give me a closer, get me a good starting pitcher, and we'll move on with our lives. He'll be batting third or fourth for the Chicago Cubs in Japan for the opening series, regardless if he's making $15.5 million or $16.5 million. And it will have no bearing whatsoever. And we'll all forget about this. If you ask me in 5 years, hey, remember when they went to arbitration? I'd probably like, oh, did they? I'll have to go back in time. I had to do the same. We had to do the same thing with Ian Happ before the show. You're like, oh, what year is that? I'm like, oh, I think it was 2021. Like, oh, no, it was 2022. I'm like, no, I think it was 2021. So like even Ian Happ, we forgot because ultimately it never made a difference. He extended and fought Jed Hoyer tooth and nail in like a court. Was there ill will there? No. They both, at the end of the day, got what they wanted. Anyway, let's move on. Let's do the ad break here. Come back out, talk about some other moves, and continue this lovely conversation.
Sounds good.
I know, on another glorious Chicago Cubs news night. Okay. With Empire today, you can shop at home convenience to provide product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a low price guarantee. They keep shopping for floors simple with a curated product selection. Empire's philosophy is to help you find what you need, not overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. What they leave out of their selection is as important as what they put in. Empire's products team exhaustively combs through thousands of product samples each year to find the perfect styles. They pride themselves on their convenient shop at home service. They help customers shop for floors where they use their floors so that they can see exactly what those new floors will look like in their home's lighting and decor so they can make an informed decision. They also service their own warranties. If an issue does arise, you can call Empire. They service all warranties themselves. You will not have to track down a manufacturer's phone number. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can get a $350 off discount when they use promo code CHGO. Restrictions do apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details. Shady Rays, get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that will not break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. Plus, if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you're like me, I leave my sunglasses at the restaurant. Happened several times. If it happens again, well, I know because they're Shady Rays, I get a free replacement. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out the best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com. Use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses so you can try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people.
Okay, Brendan, back
at it.
Joyous Cubs conversation. Yeah, look, I don't know. We'll end on the Kyle Tucker thing. Like it's similar to when they traded for him, where it's like, look, we'll kind of have to look back at the whole thing either when he hits free agency and goes somewhere else or signs with the Cubs long term. But like final thoughts, reiterating, like I'm a little disappointed, but I understand the business. And I also understand, like, don't try to avoid thinking of this as like the Cubs deliberately making some decision to like barter with him over a couple $1 million. That's literally what the process is. Like, the Cubs didn't invent this process, you know? Like, it's not like Jed Hoyer randomly was like, you know what, we can have him, but we want to save a couple $1 million. So let's do this thing. It's like, no, this is what the process is. This is what happens. This is why there's a day where there's a deadline for all of these things. So I wish that maybe they flexed their muscle a little bit more, or it felt more like they were like, we are rolling out the red carpet. Kyle Tucker will be a Cub for life, you know, or hit free agency over my dead body. But that's not where we're at. And like, this is how they're acting, and we can be disappointed that it's, you know, proceeding like this. But one, let's see if they come to terms before a trial. Let's see if they actually go to trial and have to exchange things and all that other stuff. And two, like you said, Brendan, like, either they're going to pony up the big number when it matters or not. If people want to read into this as a suggestion that they're not or never were going to, that's up to you. We don't know that right now. But ultimately, if they have the best offer in November or whatever it is later this year, then they'll get their man. This arbitration hearing, I don't think, should have an effect on that, unless hypothetically they go for a trial and for some reason have decided they are just going to, you know, start slinging mud at this guy. But I think even if they went to a trial, I don't think that's what would happen. But yeah.
You know what I've learned over the years? When extensions or lack thereof happen, there's no prior expectation. Nico Horner's extension right at the cusp of opening day. You know, we didn't really hear much about it. We were wondering, hey, they're going to extend him. They're going to, you know, approach different trade ideas as well. A lot of this stuff just like naturally works its way out. That's just kind of how it is. So I imagine for Kyle Tucker, the same will happen. And of course, all understand your point of view with fans who are disappointed. I get that, but my last thought is it's going to be okay. That's really what it is. And I know it sounds kind of redundant right now, but
yeah,
there's a lot of vitriol on social media for Cubs fans. Like, oh, this is, you know, a reflection of Cubs being cheap. And yeah, maybe they will be cheap, but baseball operates exactly like this across the market. And you listed Aaron Judge as an example, and Cubs' recent history with Ian Happ as an example as well. This is just how it is.
Yeah, I do understand, you know, the sort of overwhelmingly negative reaction, pessimistic reaction, you know, especially just given the way this organization has operated over the last few years. Like, they certainly haven't earned themselves a lot of goodwill in a lot of areas. And then it is funny in a way that Jed, what did he get? A month of goodwill after, you know, getting Kyle Tucker, to now everybody's like, nah, you know, forget that.
After reality.
Yeah. So
anyway,
I don't know. Yeah. Look, ultimately, again, he's a Cub for 2025, and they either decide to pony up and be a big boy team and keep him long-term or not. We'll
honestly,
see.
we got more pressing things for this offseason than $2 million Kyle Tucker stress reaction over here. You know, so we got bullpen issues, we got starting pitching issues. We got to
going into that. They still need another starting pitcher. We're still waiting on the Roki Sasaki market. I think that is going to be at least another 5 days. I think the 15th was like the targeted date for that, but I was seeing reports that maybe around the 20th he would make a decision, which I think is just under like what the deadline is for that decision. So maybe waiting on that a little more. We'll see if that obviously affects the Cubs. And then we did have some other decisions today. And, you know, one thing I wanted to just at least point out, Brendan, and I think it'll lead into you talking about more arms that they've acquired and how they've gone about the bullpen, et cetera. But I tweeted this out on Thursday afternoon, like with Miles Mastrobuoni being DFA'd. Now he can always sneak through waivers and re-sign with the organization, but, you know, he's DFA'd. Yan Gomes, Nick Madrigal, Miles Mastrobuoni, Patrick Wisdom, and Christopher Morel, all negative WAR players for the Chicago Cubs in 2024, none returning to the team. Again, they can sneak through waivers, they can sign a minor league deal, whatever, but none of them will be a 40-man rostered, you know, active MLB roster guy. for the Chicago Cubs. And that was one of the things that we talked about. Now, what they do at third base to supplement Matt Shaw, lead into Matt Shaw, support Matt Shaw, however they're looking at that, remains to be seen. That's one of their offseason needs that remain. But we talked about how important it was if you are not going. Now, you consolidated a lot of wins above replacement in Kyle Tucker, but if you're not just going to get several of those guys, like a team that the Dodgers have, for example, or the Braves, something like that, you can't year after year roster anywhere from 3 to 5 guys that are negative WAR players. It just doesn't work. It craters the lineup, and you don't have enough star power around it to lift the lineup up. And like, I don't have it all pulled in front of me, but like that group that I named, like you combine that all, it's basically the worst everyday player in the entire league by a significant margin. Now, of course, there's nuance. Some of these guys end up on the roster out of necessity. Some end up to give them an opportunity, and it just doesn't work. Some things just go very wrong, or it's, these are got a lot of them were playing third base on that list. But, the Yan Gomes thing, like, sure, was it a good decision to go into the season relying on a 37-year-old to keep up that production? Probably not. Should they have expected him to crater that much that quickly? I don't know. That's first. No, I don't think. But it's all just to say that is one important thing that they need to be doing in this offseason. They need to be cleaning up that bottom of the roster. We'll see how Miguel Amaya does going from last year into this year, maybe being given a more significant workload. But Carson Kelly should represent a higher floor than the options you trotted out last year in Yan Gomes and then the several guys that followed, et cetera. I know Cody's in the chat probably talking about Christian Betancourt or something like that. But all told, like, he should represent a higher floor than that. Third base, right now you're in somewhat of a similar spot, other than the key difference being Matt Shaw, obviously a much more justifiable risk taken at third base than Christopher Morel and like Nick Madrigal were, because Matt Shaw is a top prospect that has earned the right to crack the lineup versus, hey, maybe this non-former top prospect can capitalize on his, massive exit velo and learn how to play third base literally on the fly. Not really apples to apples there. So they earned that, but you still have some of those questions. But it's just to finish the thought. A big part of this offseason was doing that. You got the superstar. You have a guy who has the potential to put up 5+ WAR for you in right field in Kyle Tucker. Unless his performance is dinged, Brendan, because now he's so upset. He's so upset.
This is going to tank the entire season, dude.
I know. But like
$500K.
Cleaning up on those margins, a word we and other people have used ad nauseum over the last couple of years, like not giving 500+ plate appearances to guys that are giving you below replacement level value is a big part of this. And one of the follow-ups, and then I'll turn it over to you. Like, one of the follow-ups when I put that tweet out there was, and I don't know if you read this, Brendan, so I ask you as trivia, how many guys, the same parameters, at least 90 plate appearances, negative WAR, the Cubs had 5 such players in 2024. I listed them. How many do you think the Brewers had, by contrast? And this is a team that spent $100 million less than you.
Probably one.
Andrew Monasterio. That's it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And look at their bullpen as well. If you contrast the projections going in 2024 of their bullpen versus the output, very different. They outperform their projections as well. So to your point, they hit on the fringes on the positional side. Okay. No replacement level guys, as you just pointed out. And the guys that were not projected well with poor ERAs, they end up having some of the best ERAs in the league. McGill, Brian Hudson, for instance. So that's what they do well. That is what got them to a division championship. The Cubs, likewise, have to do that. It's part of the process, as is trading for a superstar like Kyle Tucker. That's how you become the best team, the juggernaut for long-term success as well. Third base is still up for grabs. Matt Shaw's right now going to get the first shot at it. if they make no other moves. But Matt Shaw still represents some uncertainty. I think you can, like on the back of a napkin, put him at 1-4 WAR. But that 1 WAR for 500 plate appearances, if that's what he gets, is not what you want. That's below league average for that amount of plate appearances. They will need to find a way to bring up their depth in the infield. Right now they have Vidal Brujan, who was traded for Matt Mervis. Gage Workman was picked up in the Rule 5 draft. Benjamin Cowles could be an option. None of those guys have major league success, right? So that's where there's some uncertainty with their infield options, but the offseason's not done yet. And so my thinking is a move is going to be made. I think a major league move will be made for the infield depth. What that looks like, the amount of money committed to that is to be determined. Could it be Bregman? I doubt that's going to happen given their other needs in pitching. But if the opportunity presents itself, I think Jed can make that decision. Is it going to be someone like Yoan Moncada for $3 million to $5 million? Maybe that's what it is as well. But I do believe that the risk in just giving Matt Shaw with Gage Workman or having Vidal Brujan up on the team or even Benjamin Cowles, I do think that's too risky that Jed would not do that. That's what I would bet.
Yeah, agreed. I think they will supplement that. Yeah, I just wanted to draw the clear distinction of the difference in the risk between Matt Shaw and what they did last year.
So right now, post question to you, they're projected at 87 wins. So Matt Shaw's their third baseman right now. So are you cool with giving Matt Shaw the shot with an 87 win team on paper?
I'm cool with giving him the shot, but you have to have you have to have a plan for if the plan doesn't work, right? So what's the backup plan? Let's say after a month or 2 months, and this is all if Shaw is breaking camp, he's starting as the third baseman on opening day. It's his job. Like if after a month you feel he's overmatched, and now we have to decide how long can he be overmatched before it's detrimental to his development, to his mental development, et cetera, as a Major League Baseball player. You have to have, or, an injury happens. I am knocking on wood, despite your psychosis earlier. If he gets hurt, if something happens, et cetera, you have to have a real someone who can start. And this goes into what the problem was beyond the risk. You're taking a huge risk in Morel. A lot of us liked the bat, liked the potential ceiling. And after they didn't go after a guy like Matt Chapman, who you were, vigorously pounding the drum for most of the offseason, it was like, yeah, sure, let's try to hit the high ceiling. I wish you would have let Christopher Morel play third base 6 months ago. But that was a risk in and of itself, a huge one. But then you didn't have any good insurance policies. Nick Madrigal, not a third baseman, running across the diamond to make throws.
He had a better outs above average than Matt Chapman, Corey. So
right.
He was
can't hit his way out of a wet paper bag, wet or dry paper bag. I don't even know. I don't know if that makes a difference even in the saying. It doesn't matter. Whatever bag you have, he can't hit his way out of it. Patrick Wisdom, he was a really valuable player for this team, but at that point you're on year 4 of trying to extract value out of Patrick Wisdom, knowing pretty clearly what his limitations are and things like that. And he had regressed as a defender in that time. So you didn't have any viable option. And this, of course, is on a team that doesn't have Kyle Tucker putting up hopefully 5, 6, 7 wins above replacement. So just a huge risk that you can't allow to happen. So the list of guys you named off, fine to build up some organizational depth, maybe they take some strides, et cetera. But you have to have somebody in the organization who, if it isn't working with Matt Shaw, for any reason, and you need to prioritize his development and the success of the 2025 team, that they're playing third base for you every day. Who is that now?
Is
Vidal
there?
Brujan, was a former top prospect, but his MLB numbers are awful.
He is like -1 WAR in his
Yeah, like
career.
wretched. Yeah.
I was thinking as you're talking, what is more risky? Entering the season as I did in 2024 with Morel, Madrigal, and Patrick Wisdom and Mastrobuoni. Those were the 4 guys at third base. Of course, none of them worked out, right? Is that riskier than what they're currently doing now? And
No. Or yes.
You believe it's yes. So that's what I was thinking. I'm like, was that? But hold on. Let me map out the
semantics,
thought.
But yeah.
Let me map out the thought. Morel entering 2024 was an above average bat in his first 2 years. Going into last season, he was coming off a 347 weighted on base average in almost 450 plate appearances in 2023. And so the risk here was just defensive competency. Madrigal, as much as I joke about the outs above average and him sprinting to first base and playing shallow, at least he was able to provide some value defensively, even though it was in a weird way. Patrick Wisdom always had the power potential, and Mastrobuoni still had age on his side in a minor league profile that was not whiff heavy and very disciplined. Again, none of those guys worked out, but right now the risk profile is Matt Shaw's never played Major League Baseball. He's making slightly below league average contact in AAA if you just scale that to Major League value. He also hasn't played third base in significant innings, and their backup options are Rule 5 draft picks, training for Matt Mervis with a negative WAR guy in Vidal Brujan, and Benjamin Cowles, or Gage Workman and Benjamin Cowles. It seems very volatile. And if you put the projections across the board, 2024 entering the season was less risky from just the expectations.
So I don't agree. And here's why I say that. I think it's all about the context around it. So now nothing is guaranteed, of course, but going into last year, you didn't have Kyle Tucker. So that's a huge thing, right? You have a significant consolidated WAR player. I like that phrase. So I keep using it. You have a big WAR player now that you didn't have. Maybe it could have been Cody Bellinger, like that type of thing, but you didn't know that. You have a better idea of PCA's ability to succeed than you did last year. You also have hopefully removed the question mark that you also had at first base last year. Now, again, sophomore season for Michael Busch, you and I have talked a lot about his profile, his K rate, his contact. We'll see. But you're at least hoping you're clear enough, like this guy is not going to just outright stink, even if he has to adjust, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I think the guy you're giving the opportunity to at third base, despite not having any MLB experience, not playing third base a ton, et cetera, is a more deserving candidate of that risk. He's a top prospect. He's blown through all these levels, and he's made it so that the discussion is we need to get this guy up soon. Let's put him at third base because that might be the position that's available to us. And we want to get him cooking as quickly as he can, as quickly as he's ready or they deem him ready. So I think the overall structure of the team is more certain is the wrong word, but like clearer. When you were going into last year, Morel at third base was not the only question mark. It was not the only risk you were taking. Again, all of that is not mitigated or gone coming into this year, but you just have a clearer picture, and you also have a much better player on your roster now that you just, to me, you have a little more room to take that risk. But again, that's all with the idea that Matt Shaw has some legitimate support at third base. Like if it's just him and the guys you listed off, like that is a real risk. And I think a massive mistake, which is why I don't think that they're going to do it. I'm like pretty certain they're going to bring in some other position player that can play third base.
What if it is Yoel Moncada?
I don't know.
You know that's so uncertain, dude.
That feel like to me, and I don't know who this is, and this is one of those areas where I leave it to other people to decide who this person is. But like I would be looking for something, honestly, like not like totally dissimilar to Carson Kelly at catcher, like the third base version. Just someone who, like, you know what? They can play the position, they can play defense. Maybe they'll hit, around this point. It's fine. We don't want them playing that much. And if they have to, something has already gone wrong. But at least, like, they can play the position. They'll turn double plays with Nico and Dansby, like, and not screw up the defense and leave it from there. Because, like, the risk to me is like,
that's not on the open market.
Well,
like,
that's
that
why
player
I
does not
know I'm
exist.
making it up. But
yeah, they're gonna have to
like,
make a trade for that.
I think like the Moncada thing is so volatile, like that he could be awful, like really awful. And I think he's had some like, not great like reputation things as far as like his attitude at certain times. I don't know. That just doesn't.
What about
Matt
Paul
Shaw? So, like, to me, Matt Shaw is the high ceiling play. You don't also need to sign another high ceiling, high risk guy. The backup to Matt Shaw should be a fine if it's low ceiling, but like low ceiling, low risk. Like, this is what we're getting, and it's in case of emergency. Like, that's literally what you would be signing him for. So I don't know. I'd be interested in some of those guys if they were going to spend more money and like, be a little more aggressive on certain things. But if they're not, I would like just a safe, this guy can play third base and not be a negative WAR player. If you need to send Matt Shaw back down or you need to like manage the plate appearances, whatever it is. So that would be my feeling on that. But to get back to your original question, I don't think it's a riskier proposition. I think the team is in a better spot and better suited to take that risk. The problem with the 2024 thing was you had 3 of those on the roster, 2 of them being your corner infield positions, and you didn't have Kyle Tucker. So if all 3 of those things didn't work out, right, and like one of them did, PCA did in the second half, and then one of them totally did not, to the point that you had to trade to try to get around it. Like, I think they're just in a better spot to
they're in a
try
better
that
spot
this time. So
they're in a better spot. In a vacuum, if you just look at the third base situation, regardless of the risk profile for the other positions, the less number of possibilities this year, plus the lack of MLB experience across every single possibility, inherently makes that projection more volatile than it was for Morel, Madrigal, Wisdom, and Mastrobuoni. It just does. It's just that's how it is. And for Morel, you can't discount. He almost had 1,000 plate appearances and well above league average offense going into 2024.
I hear you. Yeah.
So I did not like that risk either, by the way, because they were an 83 team. You recall.
Yeah.
I also don't particularly like the risk right now. Is there a way out of it? This might be their reality. This is the whole Jed dog they'll have to live in. And it may determine the amount of money he gets extended and the years, or even if he does get extended. But entering the season as an 87-win team with such a question mark at third base, a range of outcome of 1 WAR to 4 WAR with Shaw is very wide. And if he hits that 4 WAR, then all of our problems are solved. But if he hits that 1 WAR, well, then you're hamstringing your team. So that's where that base needs to come in.
I said at the beginning of the offseason, the best situation for these guys is to be put in a spot where they are not relied on like that. I would prefer Matt Shaw not be relied on that. The best opportunity for them and the way it works with the team is that you build a team that you project to be successful, and then you bring these guys up and they supplement that. And if you're in a situation where the Cubs signed some third baseman earlier, like even if it was Alex Bregman, but you get into a conversation of like, hey, we keep giving Matt Shaw spot starts and like he needs to keep playing because he's hitting a homer every game. What a wonderful conversation. Like, it's weird that sometimes people think of those things and like, well, what would you do with Matt Shaw? I don't know. That's what you're paying Craig Counsell $8 million a year for. Figure it out. Joe Madden was putting catchers in left field. That's what he was doing. But it's not a dissimilar conversation, Brendan. Like, Wilson Contreras is honestly a good sort of frame of reference for that. They had the catchers. They had the guys to manage the pitching staff. Wilson comes up. All he was doing was hitting. And so the conversation becomes, well, we want David Ross out there catching John Lester because that's a whole thing and it works really well. But we need this guy's lineup and we need this guy's bat in the lineup. And Joe Maddon's like, all right, send him to the outfield then. Sure.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is like, I would prefer to not be going into the year where it's Shaw's job and it's kind of like, let's see what happens. It's better if there's sort of a soft landing, and if he earns it and takes it over and you have to figure out how to deal with the playing time, great. But I unless Alex Bregman is deciding to take a Marcus Stroman, Cody Bellinger type deal, I don't know who that person is. So I'm not anticipating that.
Yeah. The 87 win projection with Shaw, it's just too risky. And even if you get to 90 wins, you can make the argument that's also a little bit too risky. The luxury that Maddon had at the time was he had pre-ARB guys and early ARB guys across the entire diamond. KB, Rizzo had that team-friendly extension. It was very easy to slot in and slot out guys. Right now, that's not the case. Right now, we have a $50 million distance from the first tier to luxury tax, and they have needs in the bullpen, needs in the starting rotation. And realistically, if you sign someone like you mentioned with Bregman for 20, 25 million, then it prohibits you from getting that bullpen and starting rotation help. It's just not feasible right now. So then it becomes a matter of how are you spending your money wisely? And if you spend significant money at third base and you have overlapping projections with Shaw and that third baseman, it doesn't seem wise. And it may be just out of the context of this current roster, not ideal, but the only path forward is you have to accept that risk because your range of ways to improve the team is now shallow. It's 6 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. Yeah. This is the roster. And he'll be judged on this at the end of the season in both good and bad. And if Shaw ends up being what we think and hope he is, then the likely outcome is we're a playoff team with pre-ARB guys in center field and third base and first base, and Jets here for the next 5 years making $8 million per year, and we're all happy. That's a realistic opportunity in reality, but there's also risk in that profile. But that, I think, is what's going to make or break, Jets front office.
It would be interesting if after all this hand-wringing, we get to a point where the Cubs are negotiating with Kyle Tucker, but it's not Jed doing the negotiating.
Yeah, it's Tommy Hotteby as president of baseball operations. That's what it would be.
No,
I think Pryor as pitching coach.
I think bring I was going to say bring Theo back, but
no, Theo's going to buy the team. Ricketts. Yeah. Theo's going to buy it. Ricketts and Crank Henry are blowing the business. Bring over Theo. Have Theo become majority owner. He'll fix a TV deal. He'll give Marquis back. That's what I'm thinking.
Did you have any parting thoughts on Matt Festa before we sign
Festa.
off?
It's the same conversation we had last week. The Cubs have like 7 bullpen arms, half of whom don't have major league deals, and all those guys have at least one pitch type that is an outlier trait. Festa in particular is interesting. If you just look at his pitch profile, first off, visualize Marcus Stroman for a second. Marcus Stroman, shorter guy, shorter stature, low release point, right? Through a hard sweeping type breaker with a fastball that has some natural carry and some natural seam shifted wake on it. Also visualize Trevor Williams, former Cub Trevor Williams, who was traded for PCA. People forget about that.
He was the headliner, right?
He was the headliner.
Yeah.
But he also has a very low release point. That's who Festa is. He's someone who has a very low release point, who has a fastball that's particularly straight with carry for someone at that release point. And he has a sweeper that rates very well. And he has a cutter that also rates really well. And his unique trait overall, I think, is his cutter, because many times cutters can drop a little bit. His cutter actually has 5 inches of induced vertical break. So for instance, Marcus Stroman has a cutter with 0 drop, whereas Festa has 5 inches of induced vertical break and the same amount of horizontal as Stroman's cutter. And so that's an interesting pitch type that could offset lefty problems that he faced in 2023 when he was getting throttled. And he developed that new pitch last year. He already has a strong base and that unique release point. He has 3 pitch types. It's a gamble, of course, doesn't have consistent success, but like the Brewers, you have to take these bets, and they have to hit in addition to the assumption of signing projectable back-end relievers. You need both of those to work.
Yeah, that was all I wanted to wrap up. We're going to wrap up in a second here, but I just wanted to, add on to what you were saying. Like, I think what you're kind of doing each week and on Twitter and whatever hey, let's look at this guy and see what pitch is interesting or what did he change recently. Like, that's what the Cubs are doing. And they're going to try to get these guys in and work with their standout pitches, features, things like that. Try to turn it into something. And I agree with you. Like I think everybody's kind of on this same thing, like something to supplement third base, either in a, bench support spot or a starting spot, if that's what they want to do, a starting pitcher and some legit relievers, one or two, like real solid relievers. That's what this team still needs. But like, as you said, bringing in all of these guys, even if they don't look interesting, or you look and you see like, oh, this guy had like a 5.5 ERA, last year or 2 years ago, like you don't need all of them to work. So when you go back through the offseason and, these episodes, Brendan has talked about any number of these relievers, some of whom we'll never hear about again. You'll never think about them.
And most of them you're not going to.
Yeah. The one time Brendan talked about how sick his changeup was, and then you'll never hear about the guy again. He'll get DFA'd and, that'll be that. But as an organization, you have to take those risks, and you just need if you can get a couple of them to work out, a couple guys that you're able to turn into like, oh, okay, now we have like some random guy that's eating big innings for us out of this bullpen. Like that's, as we said, that's one of those like on the fringe type things that you have to be successful with. They're not going to go out and sign 8 guys to be in this bullpen that all have a Hall of Fame level resume and credibility. They're not going to go fill the bullpen with top to bottom Emmanuel Class. Like that's not going to happen, So you can sign Tanner Scott, or you can sign
Jeff Hoffman.
Yeah, Hoffman from the Phillies. Like you can sign these guys, and they would be good moves. But you still are going to need other guys to come in and pitch innings for this team. So loading them up, try to find guys that are interesting and things that Tommy Hotovy and this ever-developing pitch lab can work with, and build a big stable of a pitching staff and hope that you can piece things together. And again, like that's what you pay Craig Counsell for, is to be able to piece those things together, even if the answers aren't always obvious. So we'll see what they continue to do. Weird. It's a weird off season, Brendan. I got to be honest with you. Don't you think? Of all the ones that we've covered?
We say this every single offseason. I'm surprised we actually made a big move in Kyle Tucker. So I'm already surprised.
Yeah.
Am I surprised that it's taken so long to get other moves after the Tucker trade? A little bit, yeah, but I can understand why. I understand they may be waiting for Sasaki, because if he is signed, fortunately, by the Cubs, maybe that changes their intention with Jeff Hoffman or Tanner Scott. Sure. Maybe Jeff Hoffman may be a starting pitcher like what they're doing with Clay Holmes, and that informs what you do, but you need Sasaki to make that decision. So I understand where the process is, but last offseason, dude, sucked. That was the worst offseason we've ever covered for me by far, where you're waiting up until spring training to get your hallmark move with Cody Bellinger, which it was, and it was exciting to have him back, but that offseason sucked, dude. So this one's already light years better. And one last thought. The number of bullpen arms they have signed for like minor league deals, and Eli Morgan, and by the way, it is Theobar. I was right about that, Caleb Theobar. They've actually made some more interesting moves in the pitching side of things than I can remember in recent history. Just the number of guys they've stacked up. So they are making bets. And to your point, the likely scenario is they don't work. So when we talk about, okay, well, look at this pitch type and this pitch type, it does not mean this pitch type is equally in success. It's if they are successful, this is one reason why.
Here's what they're doing, yeah.
Yeah. And so the more risk they take that are calculated and moldable by their pitching coaches, the better. And from my recent memory, anecdotally, I don't have like all the exact names. I don't recall seeing so many interesting guys acquired at one time.
Yeah.
So I feel quite encouraged
Yeah.
with the assumption they make those back end guys signed.
Sure. Yes. Right. You need the reliable
Yeah.
veteran, you know, et cetera thing. But it's a bad example, but it really is like, and this, you go in again, like not a lot of teams have bullpens that are constructed even the hypothetical way I was making up. Like a lot of teams, everybody's doing this same thing. You're trying to find a guy who can get 3 outs. And, you know, if it's a former starter, he bumps his velo a little bit, or now he's throwing his curveball more than anything else because that's what's getting it. Like everybody's doing this. You're grabbing like a big handful of darts and hurling them at the dartboard.
You need 30 to 40 innings of 3.5 to 4 ERA.
You need a couple of those darts to land, not even in the bullseye, just like on the board. That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
And if the rest of them hit the wall, they break a window, it doesn't matter.
That's fine.
Doesn't matter.
That's fine. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, Brendan, because at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are not signing for much. And, you know, you're certainly not going to take your superstar to arbitration over a couple million.
I mean, none of this
what's
matters
a few
anyway.
$1 million here?
Jed's going to be fired. We're going to suck this year. Everything's going to go to hell. So everything we're talking about is worthless.
Deal. All right. We'll be back with you next week. We'll see. Again, like I said, I understand the Kyle Tucker stuff, but ultimately we'll see in a year from now, or I guess it's possible sooner if you're thinking optimistically still. Either they pony up the big offer or they don't. And I don't think that's going to be affected by going to arbitration or not agreeing here or anything like that. And if it is, Jed's not going to have a job and we're going to have a whole different offseason to cover next year. You know, so like that's the reality of it. So that's what we have for you. As always, we appreciate your support. Brendan and I will talk to you again next week. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.